Alright, what's up guys? Time to do a caricature drawing of Eden Hazard. So, just like any other character, I'd like to start off with the outline of the head first. So we'll go with that. And again, just sort of a general shape. Obviously his hair is not perfectly round, so if you want to put some imperfections there, you can. Don't feel the need to. Okay, and then draw the ears. They don't need to be exact. Just similar. I think that would probably bode well for any caricature that you do if you don't focus on exact, but you focus on similar. So there, the other side, and just sort of a normalish chin, so we'll just go with that. Again, I'm not stressed that it looks exactly perfect. Similar is fine, okay? Always go with similar. Alright, now one thing that I like to do is with the eyebrows, I like to see sort of where the eyebrows are, height-wise, in relation to the top of the ear, and then also how far apart they are and where they are in relation to the chin. That gives me a good idea of where to start. So it's a little above the ear, and they're not that far apart, to be honest, so we're gonna go with that. So I sort of mark it off like that, and then just go from there. Okay, again, just a general shape of it. You don't want to. Excuse me, I'm doing this at school, so obviously that would be the bell. And for me, and I could probably improve in this area, is I do this with the eyebrows and then sort of adjust later on. I could probably do that a little better, but you know. Again, we're not looking for perfection here. It's a caricature, it's a quick caricature, much like you would see people at theme parks do. So if it's not exact, I'm not exactly stressing over it. Okay, so we're there with that. The nose sort of comes straight down. Like that. Sometimes you have people with wider bridges, sometimes super narrow, so you want to sort of capture that. Now, as I look at his eyes, I mean, they're pretty sort of an almond shape. There's no real, it's not jagged, it's sort of a normalish shape, and so I'm gonna go ahead and go with that. Now, as I do the eyes, after I get the general shape of it, I don't want to look back at it because I don't want it to look exact. If it looks exact, then it's sort of messed up in the fact that it's supposed to be a caricature. So, again, we're not stressing over, oh, it doesn't look exactly the same. That's okay. It's a cartoon version. So, and his nose, again, I tend to look in relation to where it is on his ear to know how long it goes. So I'm thinking right there is perfect. And then just sort of align out that way. Noses can be a tricky part and pretty important to get the general sort of feeling of the person. Sometimes, like, in this picture, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but you can see the sort of bulb is right there, so I just tend to draw that. Don't worry about all this stuff. It doesn't need to be there. If you want to, I guess you could draw a line like that, but with caricatures, a lot of times, less is better. Less is better. Okay, so we're there with that. I'm just going to add in these details real quick to his ears, because I just remembered. And again, with ears, don't need to be exact, just the general overall shape would be fine. Okay. Now, in the top part, the bottom part of his top lip, you'll see the line, how it sort of goes up on this side. So I'm going to make sure I capture that. get that from there. So there's that. And then we'll go right there with that. And sort of the bottom lip. It's not really too thick of a bottom lip. Now a lot of times with males, when you're doing caricatures, you don't necessarily need to do the top lip. At this point, I'm not really going to. We'll see where it goes after that. I may decide to do it in later as I feel. But for now, I don't feel that it's that necessary, so I'm not going to do it. So as I work on this, you don't have to have his teeth look exact. Okay, I'm just going with some overall general things, and if you learn anatomy of teeth, then you'll learn, you know, what the front teeth look like, so on and so forth. I'm not stressing over it too much. So there, and then I'll color this in. You'll notice that it doesn't look exactly the same as his teeth, and it's okay with me. Okay, so that's good there. I don't want to worry about his laugh line. There's that. And at this point, we're coming pretty close to the line work being done, in all honesty. There, so the reason why we do that is for a light source. You want to leave at least a little bit of light in the pupil, meaning like a blank little space. It makes it look a little more realistic. And for this, we're just doing some overall general things. You could see the top of his eyelid there. Okay, and then be careful with, like, you can see that the bottom of his eyes, it kind of goes like that, but the more lines you draw with like bags and different things, the older the person's gonna look. So you want to be careful if you're going to do stuff like that. All right. Again, with this facial hair, he has brown hair, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that later in color. So at this point, our general line work on his head is pretty much done. A couple details here and there. Don't stress too many details, but just a few things that if you feel like they're important that you should put in, then put them in. Cheekbone. Cheekbone there. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with that. Now as we color, it's gonna look even more and more like him. But in terms of line work, I'm pretty pleased. So again, you know, in the picture, his neck goes straight down, but this is a cartoon, so we're gonna have it go out to the side. You know, things like that make it, you can already see how much more cartoony it looks just from that alone. Okay. Alright, now to darken up some of these features. So there's a couple things on your caricature that you're gonna want to have thicker lines. Meaning you're gonna want thicker lines so that way it gives it more of a 3D look. It makes things sort of pop out as opposed to being pretty flat. So at this point, that's what I'm gonna do. Definitely the bottom of the lip, and hopefully that after you look, it's gonna just generally look better also, but there should be, it basically makes your drawing look just a lot better. Again, it makes things pop out a little more, but it also gives it just sort of, I don't want to say artsy, but it makes different portions of it pop out. It gives it a little more of a clean look. I guess that's the best way to put it. It looks cleaner. It looks better. So I'm going to do that with a few of these lines. Let's just sort of darken stuff up. Definitely the outside of your caricature you're going to want relatively thick. And if at all possible, have it go from thick to thin. So at this point, you can see I'm pressing down pretty hard on the brush pen, and then I'll lighten up, and that just sort of gives it a thin to thin look. So anytime you want lines to be relatively thick, you push down, and then if you want them to thin out, you just sort of pull up on your pen. So that's what we're doing here. So the top eyelash you definitely want to darken. Around the nose, that'll make that pop out. Right here on the bridge of the nose, you might want to do that a little bit. Again, darkening stuff around just makes things pop out almost in a 3D sense. So, and then a lot of times here, and that just brings stuff out into the foreground a little more. So at this point, I like that. There's some other stuff that we can touch up on a little bit later, which we will do. So at this point, we'll go ahead and start coloring. I have two of my lighter colors. First off, we have the E21. Those of you that have Copic markers, or some of you have asked like what Copic markers I'm using for skin. I have E21 and E11. These are expensive markers, so I only have 4 to be honest, and they're all skin tones. I'm gonna probably range out from that point, but right now all I have is skin tones. And then I always use the brush tip. I hardly ever use the chisel tip side. So, and as I color through this, I'll go section by section. So I'll start off with this part of the forehead and just color that in. Now, how I do it is I'll put my base tone first, which is your lighter tone. Then you go to your darker tone. And as you go to your darker tone, you're going to basically make the darker parts of it. So from here, in the picture, you can kind of see that the light source is coming from the left. So I'm going to have the darker parts be on the right, away from the light source. But in general, you're going to want the top near his hair to be a little darker, and then in around his eyes and that sort of thing. But you can kind of see where it's a little darker. So I go in with my darker tone, and then to sort of make it blend in, you go back in with your lighter tone and saturate it a little bit, and it should blend in a little more naturally as opposed to having just a line from there. So it blends in a little better. So I decided to time-lapse the rest of it because I explained how to color, or how I color these things anyway. Excuse me. So the biggest thing to notice is that I've kept it, I did the darker tones on the right hand side and the lighter tones on the left because of where the light source is. So it's important to understand where your light source is. One thing of importance that I did here was to color in underneath his fade, because if the person that you're doing has a fade of any sort, you're going to want skin color underneath what little hair you draw. So I just did dots and stippling for stubble, and then darker brown for the places where he had longer hair. So I'm pretty pleased with this. This is Eden Hazard, number 10, forward for the mighty, mighty Chelsea. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. This is Mr. L, or Mr. Lin Sangan. God bless.